Meet Natalie Carter, a Manhattan power player who bankrolled her ungrateful family for years until they crossed the line. She planned a dream Christmas at Skytop Lodge to fix their broken bonds, but her brother Ethan stabbed her in the back, booking her out of her own gift. Betrayed and done, Natalie ditched them in the snow and drove off into the night. What happens when the ATM says no? Buckle up for a tale of loyalty, revenge, and a woman finding her real family. The snow fell in thick, relentless sheets as I guided my sleek black Audi through the winding roads of the Poconos, the headlights slicing through the dusk like a lifeline. Skytop Lodge was only a few miles ahead, its promise of roaring fireplaces and evergreen-draped luxury tugging at my exhausted heart. I'd spent weeks planning this Christmas getaway months, really, if you counted the endless phone calls, the meticulous budgeting, the quiet sacrifices. It was supposed to be perfect. A chance to mend the frayed threads of my family, to remind them and myself that we were still bound by something more than resentment and old wounds. In the passenger seat, my mother, Margaret, fiddled with her scarf, her lips pursed in that familiar way that signaled disapproval. Behind me, my brother Ethan sprawled across the back seat, his wife Sophia nestled against him, both of them scrolling through their phones with the bored indifference of teenagers. Gerald, my stepfather, snored softly beside them, his head lolling against the window. They hadn't offered to help with the drive from Manhattan, hadn't thanked me for footing the bill, hadn't even asked how I was holding up after another grueling year at the firm. But that was nothing new. I'd carried them for years, financially, emotionally, sometimes literally, like now, and I'd convinced myself it was my duty. After all, Dad's inheritance had come to me, the responsible one, and with it came the unspoken expectation that I'd keep the Carter family afloat. The lodge loomed into view, its stone facade glowing warmly against the snowy pines. I exhaled, a flicker of hope sparking in my chest. "We're here," I said, forcing a smile. "Skytop Lodge. Merry Christmas, everyone." Sophia glanced up, her perfectly manicured brows lifting. "Huh, looks quaint." "It's beautiful," I countered, parking the car. "Wait till you see the suites. I booked us the best they had." Ethan snorted, shoving his phone into his coat pocket. "Yeah, well, let's hope it's worth the hype, Nat. You've been going on about this place forever." I ignored the jab, stepping out into the biting cold. The air smelled of pine and wood smoke, and for a moment, I let myself believe this could work. We'd sit by the fire, sip mulled wine, laugh about old times. Maybe Ethan would soften. Sophia would stop treating me like hired help, and Mom would finally see me as more than a walking bank account. Maybe Gerald would say something kind for once. Maybe. Inside, the lobby was a vision of holiday cheer twinkling lights, a towering Christmas tree, the hum of festive chatter. I approached the front desk, my family trailing behind me like reluctant shadows. The clerk, a young woman with a bright smile, greeted me. "Welcome to Skytop Lodge. Checking in?" "Yes," I said, sliding my ID across the counter. "Carter, party of 5. I booked 3 suites under Natalie Carter." Her fingers danced over the keyboard, then paused. She frowned, tilting her head. I'm seeing only 2 suites under that name, and they're registered to an Ethan Carter." My stomach dropped. "What?" "No, that's not right. I made the reservations myself. 3 suites, all under my name." Ethan stepped forward, his broad shoulders brushing past me. "Relax, Nat. I called ahead and made a few changes. No big deal." I turned to him, my pulse quickening. "Changes? What changes?" He smirked, that infuriating half grin he'd perfected over years of getting his way. "Well, Sophia and I wanted the grand suite. It's got that killer view, and Mom and Gerald needed something decent, so I swapped things around. You're fine with the staff quarters or whatever, right? You're used to slumming it." The words hit me like a slap, sharp and cold. "Staff quarters? Ethan, I paid for this entire trip, every dime. I booked the suites for all of us." "Yeah, and I appreciate it," he said, clapping a hand on my shoulder like I was some loyal dog. "But come on, Nat. You don't need all that space. You're just the driver anyway." Sophia giggled, tucking a strand of blonde hair behind her ear. Mom adjusted her scarf again, avoiding my gaze. Gerald yawned, oblivious. The clerk shifted awkwardly behind the desk, her smile faltering. I stood there, frozen, the weight of their casual cruelty sinking in. This wasn't a mistake or a misunderstanding. This was deliberate. They'd taken my gift, my last desperate attempt to hold us together, and turned it into another way to shove me aside. Years of writing checks, of bailing Ethan out of failed ventures, of paying Mom's bills while she praised his ambition, of swallowing their barbs with a smile, it all crashed over me like an avalanche. "No," I said, my voice trembling but firm. "This isn't happening." Ethan rolled his eyes. "Don't be dramatic. It's just a room." "It's not just a room," I snapped, my hands curling into fists. "It's everything. I'm done." Before he could respond, I pulled out my phone and stepped away, my boots clicking against the polished floor. My fingers shook as I dialed James. He picked up on the second ring, his warm baritone cutting through the chaos in my head. "Natalie, you okay?" "No," I said, blinking back tears. "I need a favor. A big one." "Name it," he said without hesitation. James owned a boutique hotel chain, a friend I'd leaned on more times than I cared to admit. He'd seen me at my lowest after Dad died, after Ethan's first betrayal, and never judged me for staying loyal. "Cancel the Skytop reservations," I said. "All of them, right now." There was a pause, then a low whistle. "You sure? That's a hell of a move." "I've never been sure," I replied, glancing back at my family. Ethan was arguing with the clerk now, his voice rising. "They don't deserve it. They don't deserve me." "Done," James said. "Where are you going next?" "Anywhere but here," I said. Can I come to you?" "Always," he said. "I'm at the Hudson property. Drive safe, Nat. I'll have a room ready." I hung up, my resolve hardening. The clerk approached me, her expression apologetic. "Miss Carter, I'm so sorry, but the reservations have just been canceled. There's nothing available now. It's Christmas Eve." "That's fine," I said, forcing a smile. "I'm leaving." Ethan whirled on me, his face red. "What the hell did you do?" "What I should have done years ago," I said, grabbing my keys. "Enjoy the snow." I didn't wait for their protests, didn't look back as I strode out into the storm. The cold bit at my cheeks, but it felt like freedom. I climbed into my car, started the engine, and drove away, leaving them stranded in the parking lot. Ethan shouting, Sophia clutching her designer coat, Mom staring after me like I'd lost my mind. The road stretched ahead, dark and endless, but for the first time in years, I felt light, unburdened. When I arrived at James's hotel in Hudson, he was waiting in the lobby, a glass of bourbon in hand and a knowing look in his eyes. "Merry Christmas, Nat," he said, handing me the drink. "You finally did it." I took a sip, the warmth spreading through me. "Yeah, I did." The bourbon burned a slow trail down my throat as I sank into the leather armchair across from James. His hotel in Hudson was smaller than Skytop, but it had a quiet elegance, dark wood paneling, soft jazz drifting from hidden speakers, a fire crackling in the corner. The Christmas lights strung along the windows cast a golden glow over us, and for the first time that day, I felt like I could breathe. James leaned back in his chair, studying me with those steady green eyes that always seemed to see more than I wanted to show. "So," he said, swirling his drink, "want to tell me how it feels to burn it all down?" I let out a shaky laugh, the sound foreign even to me. "Terrifying. Exhilarating. I don't know yet. Ask me tomorrow when they start blowing up my phone." "They will," he said, a faint smile tugging at his lips. "Ethan's not the type to go quietly." "No, he's not." I stared into the amber liquid in my glass, the memory of his smirk in the Skytop lobby flashing through my mind. None of them are. They'll scream, they'll guilt me, they'll probably call me selfish, and part of me still wonders if they're right. James set his glass down with a deliberate clink, leaning forward. "Natalie, listen to me. You've spent, 10 years? Propping them up. You paid off Ethan's gambling debts, covered Mom's mortgage when she blew her savings on that ridiculous spa retreat, even bailed Gerald out of that DUI mess he never thanked you for. And what did they give you? A back seat in your own car and a cot in the staff quarters. That's not family. That's a leech colony." His words landed like stones, heavy and unyielding. I wanted to argue, to defend the years I'd poured into them, but the truth was too loud to ignore. I'd been their safety net, their ATM, their punching bag. And tonight, when I'd handed them a gift wrapped in hope, they'd torn it open and spit on it. I thought this trip would fix things, I admitted, my voice barely above a whisper. Stupid, right? Like a few days in a fancy lodge could erase all the crap they've pulled. Not stupid, James said. Optimistic. You've got a heart bigger than most, Nat. But there's a difference between love and letting people walk all over you. I nodded, the lump in my throat making it hard to speak. We sat in silence for a while, the fire popping and hissing, until he stood and grabbed a bottle from the bar. Come on, he said, refilling my glass. Let's make this a proper Christmas Eve. No family drama, just you, me, and some overpriced liquor. For the next few hours, we talked, really talked. Not about them, but about me. My job at the firm, the deals I'd closed that year, the quiet pride I took in my work. James told me about his latest hotel project, a quirky little place in Vermont he was turning into a ski retreat. It felt normal, grounding, like I was more than just the Carter family's fixer. When midnight rolled around, he raised his glass in a toast. To new beginnings, he said. To new beginnings, I echoed, clinking my glass against his. And in that moment, I believed it. The call started at 7 a.m. Christmas morning. My phone buzzed on the nightstand, pulling me from a restless sleep in the plush guest suite James had given me. Ethan's name flashed on the screen, and I let it go to voicemail. Then Sophia, then Mom. By the third round, I turned it off and buried my face in the pillow, the weight of their inevitable anger pressing against my ribs. When I finally dragged myself downstairs, James was in the dining room, a spread of coffee, pastries, and bacon laid out like a peace offering. Figured you'd need fuel, he said, nodding toward my phone as I set it on the table. How bad is it? Bad enough, I said, pouring a cup of coffee. I haven't listened yet. I'm not ready. Then don't, he said simply. They don't get to ruin today, too. I managed a small smile, but the unease lingered. We ate in companionable silence, the snow falling outside in lazy spirals. It was peaceful until the front desk called James an hour later. Miss Carter, the receptionist said when I took the phone, there's a group here asking for you. They say they're your family. My stomach twisted. They're here? How? James raised an eyebrow as I handed the phone back. They must have rented a car or begged a ride, I said, incredulous. Skytop's only an hour away. Want me to send them packing? He asked, already reaching for his radio. I hesitated, torn between the old instinct to smooth things over and the new, fragile strength I'd found last night. No, I said finally. I'll deal with them, but not in here. Outside. He nodded, and 10 minutes later, I stood on the hotel's front steps, bundled in my coat as Ethan, Sophia, Mom, and Gerald trudged up the snowy path. They looked disheveled, Ethan's hair wild, Sophia's makeup smudged, Mom's scarf askew. Gerald just looked cold. What the hell, Natalie? Ethan barked as he reached me, his breath puffing in the frigid air. You canceled everything and left us in the middle of nowhere? You left yourselves there, I shot back, crossing my arms. I gave you a Christmas you didn't deserve, and you turned it into a slap in my face. Sophia stepped forward, her voice dripping with indignation. We had nowhere to go. The lodge was booked solid, and we spent the night in some shitty motel because of you. Good, I said, my tone icy. Maybe it'll teach you to appreciate what you had. Mom's eyes widened, her hands wringing together. Natalie, honey, this isn't you. We're your family. You can't just abandon us. Abandon you? I laughed, bitter and sharp. I've carried you for years, Mom. Every bill, every screw-up, every tantrum. I'm done. Ethan's face darkened. You think you're better than us now? You'll regret this when you're alone and miserable. I'm not alone, I said, glancing back at the hotel where James stood in the doorway, watching. And I'm not miserable. Not anymore. They stared at me, stunned, as I turned and walked back inside. James closed the door behind me, his expression a mix of pride and amusement. That, he said, was badass. The weeks that followed were a storm of silence and fury. They stopped calling after a while, But the guilt trips came through other channels, texts from cousins I barely knew, emails from mom's friends, even a letter from Gerald claiming I'd broken her heart. I deleted them all, my resolve hardening with each attempt. By February, the cracks in their world started showing. Ethan lost his leased BMW. He'd missed too many payments without my backup. Sophia's Instagram went quiet, her endless stream of designer bags and brunches drying up. Mom called me in tears one night, begging for help with the mortgage. The house was in foreclosure, she said, and they'd lose everything. "Please, Natalie," she sobbed. "We're family." I sat on my couch in my sleek Manhattan apartment, the city skyline glittering beyond the window, and felt nothing but calm. "You had your chance," I said. "I'm not your lifeline anymore." I hung up, and that was the last time we spoke. Spring brought clarity. I threw myself into work, landing a promotion to senior analyst. I started hiking with James on weekends, laughing more than I had in years. I made new friends, people who asked about my day, who didn't expect anything but my company. And slowly, the Carter family faded into a distant memory, their chaos no longer my burden. April bloomed across Manhattan like a promised cherry blossoms dusting the sidewalks, the air softening with hints of warmth. I'd settled into a rhythm by then, my days filled with client meetings and late-night spreadsheets, my weekends spent hiking the Hudson Valley with James or grabbing drinks with my new crew from the firm. The Carter family had faded into a dull ache, like a bruise I'd stopped pressing on. I thought I'd moved past them until Ethan showed up. It was a Tuesday, gray and drizzly, when I stepped out of the elevator into the sleek lobby of my office building on Wall Street. I was juggling a coffee and my phone, texting James about a trail we'd planned to tackle that weekend, when I saw him. Ethan stood by the reception desk, his broad frame slouched in a wrinkled blazer, his hair uncombed. He looked smaller than I remembered, diminished, like the swagger had been wrung out of him. My stomach clenched, but I squared my shoulders and kept walking. "Natalie," he called, his voice cutting through the hum of the lobby. Heads turned colleagues, security, the receptionist who'd started to like me after I'd brought her donuts one morning. I stopped, turning slowly to face him. "What are you doing here, Ethan?" I asked, keeping my tone flat. He stepped closer, his boots scuffing the marble floor. "We need to talk, now." "There's nothing to say," I replied, shifting my coffee to my other hand. "You shouldn't be here." "Bullshit," he snapped, loud enough to make the receptionist flinch. "You don't get to just walk away and pretend we don't exist. You owe us." I stared at him, the words igniting something hot and fierce in my chest. "Owe you? After everything I've done? Get out, Ethan. I'm working." He didn't budge, his jaw tightening. "You think you're so high and mighty now, don't you? Big shot analyst, fancy apartment, new friends. But you're still the same Natalie who'd do anything for us. And we're drowning out there because of you." "Drowning?" I laughed, sharp and bitter. "You're drowning because you spent years swimming in my money instead of learning to float on your own. I paid your rent, your car loans, your stupid bar tabs. I bailed you out when that business of yours tanked twice. And you thanked me by treating me like a doormat. I don't owe you a damn thing." His face flushed, a vein pulsing in his temple. "You're selfish, you know that? Mom's losing the house. Sophia can't even afford her meds. Gerald's drinking again. We're falling apart, and you're just fine?" "I am fine," I said, stepping closer, my voice low and steady. "For the first time in years, I'm fine. Because I stopped letting you drag me down. You made your choices, Ethan. Live with them." He grabbed my arm, his grip tight enough to bruise. "You don't get to decide when we're done. We're family." I yanked free, my coffee splashing onto the floor. "Family doesn't steal from you.